Welcome to a brand new video. My name is Arfat, and today's video is a follow-up video about a video that I made last week, whereby I addressed this book, Jesus in the Talmud. I realized that in that 30-minute video, there's a lot of things that I wasn't able to get it across, and so I would like to get these points across in today's video. The first thing that I would like to discuss is not so much about the content of this book. I've done that last week in the previous video. I would like to explore more about the early relationship between Judaism and quote-unquote Jewish Christians. I refuse to use the word Christianity here today when referring to the early followers of Jesus, because they are not Christians. Later on, according to the book of Acts, the first Christians were known in Syria, but that is, I believe, an anachronistic reading of the text, okay, of the history. During the time of Jesus, there were no such thing as Christians. Jesus, as a lot of historians, academic historians, show us and tells us in academic journals and writings and publications and books as well, Jesus was a Jew. But what type of Jew was he? He definitely wasn't the Jew who observed the complete Mosaic law, because we all know that Jesus came to abrogate the law. Anyone who reads the Gospels will find this statement to be will be familiar with this statement. Like in Matthew and Mark, they portray a different version of Jesus. And so which version of Jesus is actually true or truer? According to most historians, Matthew redacted Mark, and so Mark is the earliest or the earlier account. But that doesn't really make Mark the more truer gospel in a sense. And it also doesn't make Mark the more truer account about who Jesus actually was. If we look at Luke, for example, Luke refers to in his opening statement, his prologue, that many people have written a lot of accounts. And so now this is my turn to write an account in an orderly manner. Now, what does the word orderly here mean when the author of Luke say this? A lot of scholars believe that when Luke mentions an orderly account, it is not necessarily the orderly account in modern standard. And it should not be, because Luke wrote about 2,000 years ago. And so what is the meaning of the orderly account here when Luke refers to in his prologue to the Gospel of Luke? Basically, it could mean a lot of things. And different scholars over the years have interpreted it in a different way. But I'll just present two opinions. In one end, scholars believe that the orderly account is not chronologically in a sense, okay, and they are not necessarily a historical account. They are an account that was written, okay, about history, but the message that Luke wanted to give to the readers was a theological one. Meaning it is a theological message embedded in a historical, quote-unquote, historical narrative. On the other end of the spectrum, some scholars say that Luke portrays an orderly account in the truest sense of the word orderly. It basically means that Luke had known Mark, definitely. A lot of scholars agree with this because Luke changes Mark, obviously. So scholars like Bartram and Dale Martin believe that Luke must have a source like Mark, or Mark itself in front of him, and then he makes some changes to it. And also Luke has his own source called the L material, and also called Q. And so Luke uses a variety of sources. These sources are all hypothetical sources, and except for Mark. And scholars really believe that Luke has access to Mark, or knew a form of Mark, because we can see where Luke actually changes Mark. There's a book published by Ziba Crook It is Gospel Side by Side. I forgot the title of it. It's published by Oxford University Press. I have it here, but I'm lazy to pull out. But and so Luke wrote an orderly account, meaning that Luke here is trying to say that both Matthew and Mark, or at least Mark, is wrong in portraying who Jesus actually was. Now it depends on which side of the spectrum you take on board. My position is more towards the whereby Luke really believed that Mark actually made a mistake about who Jesus actually was. And so we can interpret this in a variety of ways, but that doesn't mean that one end of the spectrum is wrong and the other end of the spectrum is right. Depends on which side of the spectrum you take on board, and your interpretation of Mark and Luke will be different. And so how do we actually know the truth? How do we know the truth about the real Jesus? Who was the real Jesus? We only have scars of evidence that, and this evidence, when I say evidence, basically all four gospels, or at least the synoptics, would agree amongst themselves. Okay, meaning they are in agreement. And one of them is that Jesus was definitely a Jew. But it's how you interpret what kind of Jew was Jesus. Did Jesus bring a new message of Judaism, or did Jesus invent a different message to the Mosaic law? And this would mean that Jesus came to bring a new sect of Judaism. Or as in Matthew, Jesus follows strictly the Mosaic law, because not one jot or tittle shall be abolished from the law until heavens and earth passed away. I'm using the King James here. But on the other hand, Mark says that Jesus declared all foods clean. Okay. And so we have a different kind of Jesus here. But according to most historians and scholars, they believe that Mark actually has the truest portrayal of who Jesus actually was, and that he came to bring an abrogated Mosaic law, okay, the Torah, okay, the law basically. But I believe that using Mark alone and taking Mark itself as the most truest account about who Jesus actually was is actually not the right way to move, because we have to examine the different parallels that we have across the synoptic at least. We don't need to talk about John here, because John is much later, and a lot of scholars believe that John is not historical anyway, and I share the same opinion with them. But we have to take a look at Mark, Matthew, and Luke, and if all of them share a parallel about the narrative of Jesus, then we can really use those sources to reconstruct who the historical Jesus really was, especially when it comes to his theology and his practices and belief. We're not talking about historical narrative here. We are talking about Jesus' own theology. And so I don't think it is right to just use Mark as the most truest portrayal of Jesus, because it is the earliest. But if we apply the same standards to different fields, it doesn't mean that the most earliest account could be the most truest account. And I don't think any scholars would say that this is actually what it is. Same if we go to the textual criticism. Doesn't mean the earliest manuscripts that we have is the most truest manuscripts, because the earliest manuscripts that we have could be copied from mistake manuscripts. And so the subsequent copies that we have were all mistaken copies. Okay? And so it doesn't mean that the most truest account, the most earliest account is actually the most truest account. Because remember, we do not have access to manuscripts within the first 100 years of the ascension of Jesus. And so, does this have to do with the relationship with Judaism? Because if we read the gospel, all the four gospels, especially so in John, okay, John kept mentioning the Jews, the Jews, the Jews. And so we know that across all four gospels, they all agree, and in the apocryphal as well. Okay, some apocryphal gospel also agrees that the Jews were the one who actually um, tried to the Jews were the one who hinders the ministry of Jesus, to put it in the simplest of words. Okay, and so this means that this is probably a true account, whereby the Jews hinders the missionary of Jesus, and the reason why Jews hinders the missionary of Jesus was because Jesus was preaching a kind of Mosaic law that is foreign to them. Because if we look at the history of Judaism, the Jews never hinders the missionaries of other pagan and cultic religion. Okay, they basically let them be as it is. And so Jesus must have brought a kind of Judaism that the Jews disagree with, and that's why they being zealous for the law of Moses, they wanted to stop Jesus from misguiding the people in a sense. I'm putting myself in their shoes here. Obviously, we have different kinds of interpretation, and I've gone through this in my previous video, whereby Jesus was preaching the kingdom, but his kingdom is in the afterlife. Okay, Jesus declared himself the Messiah. He is the Son of Man. But Jews were waiting for the Davidic Messiah, whereby they can be liberated from the oppressive Romans of the time. But Jesus did not bring all this. Jesus says that my kingdom is in heaven. Okay, in his trial, he said this. And so what is the relationship, and what caused later rabbis to write in the Talmud, probably by the 4th century of the Common Era, to write such a derogatory term about Jesus? Okay, what causes them to go to that extent? And so this is something that I'm really interested in, and obviously this is still an area of research. There's not a lot of academic books written about this. Probably the closest one was another one by Peter Schaeffer. Let me just pull up the book, The Jewish Jesus. Okay, The Jewish Jesus. I'll talk about this book in later videos. But so what is the relationship between Jews and Jesus, as well as Jewish followers of Jesus later on? And so this is the area that I would like to briefly speak about in this video. And so if we turn back to the gospel, we know that the followers of Jesus, okay, the followers of Jesus who walk with Jesus, the disciples of Jesus, the 12 of them, including Judas, meaning the 13 disciples of Jesus, they were all Palestinian Jews. They were before the time of Jesus, or before Jesus go on his ministry. These disciples and their families were Torah observant Jews, basically. Yeah, this is presumably. We do not have any evidence. We do not have any text from them that says so. They could be pagan, and we do not know this. But presumably they were Jews living in Palestine. They go to the temple to observe the Passover festivals. Luke portrays an early account about Jesus in the Jerusalem temple, but Matthew and Mark only portrays Jesus in Jerusalem towards the end of their Gospels. And in Luke, Jesus went to Jerusalem a couple of times, but in Matthew and Mark, Jesus only went to Jerusalem once. Okay, and that's it. But do we assume that Jesus never went to Jerusalem when he was young? Because if he was a Jew, then he must have been to Jerusalem before, And so these are all in the realm of hypothesis. We do not have evidence, but we can only make educated guesses based on what Jews of their time would have done. And even our sources in this era is very scarce. We have Josephus, for example. But how accurate is Josephus? A lot of scholars believe that Josephus' manuscripts have been tampered with by later quote-unquote Christians. And so how accurate is Josephus? And so the same textual criticism that applied to the New Testament should be applied to the manuscripts of Josephus as well, and later patristic writings as well. And again, we do not have early manuscripts of the writings of the Church Fathers. The earliest manuscripts that we have were from the 4th, 5th, and 6th centuries. And so does the New Testament even, okay? And so we have to be very careful here as to how we interpret the accounts that we have. But I'm not here trying to say that we should be very skeptical about all these things. There are some things that we can accept, and our criteria here must be very, very strict. But then again, the best thing to say is we do not actually know the real answer. There's no way for us to know, because we do not have the earliest copies, yet alone the original, or the copies of the original, or the copies of the copies after that. And even if we have the copies and the copies after that, how do we know that the manuscripts have not been tampered with? And so we have to be very careful here. And so the relationship between Jesus and Judaism is that Jesus was a Jew, but he came to preach a different kind of law. He came to abrogate the law of Moses, and this caused controversy during his time, and this made the Jews wanted to get him into trouble. Now, we have to approach this from both sides. We have approached this from the Jewish Christian sides, and now we're going to approach this from the Judaic side. Jews have been waiting for the Messiah ever since the Babylonian exile, when they were allowed to return to Judea after the Persian conquest defeated the Babylonian kingdom. But they thought that they would have Judea for themselves again, but then they ended up being subjugated by foreign powers. Okay, first the Persians, and then they were Hellenized. Okay, and then now under the Romans. And because of this, we have many Jewish revolts that happened. Okay, many Messiah were crucified by the Romans. The most prominent one was in 125 to 135 CE, Simon Bar Kokhba. And so from this account, if we read backwards with the intent or with a zeal, in a sense, we can somehow determine that actually the Jews have been waiting to be liberated from the oppressive Romans, and that is why they fought against the Romans in the Jewish war. And that is also why there was a huge revolt in 135 of the Common Era, which causes the death of a lot of Palestinian and Syrian Jews. Okay, the entire, according to scholars believe that the Essenes community in Qumran were completely wiped out. Okay, because they were either defeated during the Jewish war, or what remains of them were defeated during the Simon Bar Kokhba revolt. And so from this, we can understand, or try or attempt to understand, to put ourselves in the context of the people within the first century of the Common Era, is that the Jews have been waiting to be liberated from the oppressive Romans. And that is why they are willing to fight to the very end. During the Jewish war, the temple was destroyed, and a lot of Jews were massacred by the Romans. Okay. So from this we can somehow infer or try to understand that the Jews finally had enough. They felt that they have been oppressed, and they believed that Judea belongs to them because God promised Abraham, if you read the Tanakh. And so from here we can infer whereby the Jewish war was the final, that's it, the Jews say, okay, let's do this, or we would rather die, in a sense. Okay. And so when Jesus came with a message to proclaim to the Jews that, look, your kingdom is in heaven, okay? Your kingdom is not on earth. Stop trying to form a new kingdom on earth. Okay. Your kingdom is actually in heaven, in a sense. And that is why Jesus' message was rejected. Okay, part of the reason why. I couldn't think of a stronger reason than this, because if you read the New Testament, the trial before Pontius Pilate and before the Jewish Sanhedrin, so on and so forth, the Jewish priests or high priests, so on and so forth. That is when Jesus actually was at the most vulnerable. And so from here somehow we can infer, again, attempt to understand that they had Jesus cornered to the side, and so now Jesus must have felt that okay, this is it, I'm just gonna lay the complete message to you. Okay, whether you accept it or not, that is up to you. But what I'm saying to you is that your kingdom is in heaven and not in the world. Okay, that's why Jesus said, my kingdom is in heaven. And he came to preach to the Jews, and some of the Jews follows him in his ministry. Okay, presumably the 12 disciples, 11 if you discount Judas. And so they must have believed that Jesus came to preach the Jewish law, okay, because Jesus still goes to the synagogue. If you're not a Jew, you still go to the synagogue, but you don't preach in the synagogue. Okay. And the Gospels also tells us that Jesus always had an interaction with the scribes and the Pharisees, and at times with the Sadducees. And so the Pharisees would not have any problem with the pagans. In the diaspora synagogue, pagans or Hellenized Jews would still go to the synagogues to hear the Torah being recited, and they are welcome. Okay, the Jews welcome just not in the Holy of Holies. Okay, and just like the Muslim, we welcome the people from other religious community, but they don't enter the place of the imam, so on and so forth. Okay, not because it is Holy of Holies, but because you need to make ablutions, so on and so forth. Okay, before you enter there. And Jews do make wudu as well. They do have a ritual washing, so on and so forth, before they engage in reading the Torah, so on and so forth. And so pagans were allowed in the synagogues, and a lot of people actually this is well known, and so the theory whereby Jews do not allow people to enter the synagogues is actually false. Even till today, you are still allowed to enter the synagogues and watch the ceremonies or the sermons that's being taken place in synagogues. And so it is the same in the ancient past as well. Okay, when we have a lot of evidence whereby pagans actually goes into the diaspora synagogues to listen to the Torah being recited. And so I couldn't think of a much stronger reason as to why Jews actually rejected Jesus. And one other reason that came close to it was probably because they found that Jesus wanted to misguide some of the Jews. Okay, in a sense. Now, this is hypothesis. We do not have any evidence but we can only assume or presume rather. But I don't think this is a strong evidence. The stronger evidence was what we have. Okay, is what we have in writings, and that is the Gospels, whereby Jesus claimed that my kingdom is in heaven and it's not on earth. Okay, and that is why Pilate declares Jesus innocent. And so the Jews do not have any reason to quote unquote punish Jesus, and so they have to subject to making Jesus seem to try to cause a revolt against the Roman governor in Judea. And this is the only way that they can somehow get Jesus removed, okay, from their surroundings in a sense. But the Quran says, وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ وَمَا صَلَبُوهُ. They do not kill him, nor do they crucify him. And so, again, the Gospel of Luke somehow is evidence to this, because, and also I'll use the writing of Paul, because Paul says that a resurrected body is a spiritual body in a sense. And according to the analysis by Dale Martin, former professor at Yale University, a spiritual body is like air in a sense. Okay? And so it is not a physical fleshy body that we found in Luke. Okay? Because in Luke, Jesus appears after his resurrection, okay, and in a physical body, and he ate fish. Okay? And the disciples are able to touch his sides here. Jesus says, "Feel me, feel me." Okay. And so Luke knew a form of an account of Paul when it comes to this. Again, this is the area of research that not a lot have been written about, and I wish there's a lot more. There are books and papers written about this, but I wish there are more materials for the lay audience like myself, whereby we can actually assess this and understand this. I mean, the commentaries have this definitely, but a more concise version for the general public. And I wish scholars would actually write something, a book about this topic for the lay audience in a sense, because the commentaries that wrote about these things, they goes into the, like Dale Martin, he went into the analysis of the Greek words and so forth, and so it could be really hard to digest for the lay audience like myself. So I wish there was something written about this topic. Luke actually knew of kind of Pauline letters, possibly the Corinthians, okay, because the Corinthians is where we found this. A resurrected body is like a spiritual body, like air, for example. But yeah, so I hope this video have been interesting. Again, Jesus in the Talmud. Okay, I only managed to briefly discuss about the relationship between early Judaism and Christianity, that is the Jewish followers of Jesus, and I wish to go more into this, but maybe in the future. But Jesus in the Talmud, a very, very interesting subject. Yeah, but open your mind if you have a close one. But again, a disclaimer, this book could offend you because of the writings that are found in it about Jesus and his mom, and how they are portrayed in the Talmudic writings and the commentaries. And so I'll see you on my next one. Thank you.